Hey, this is Everett DeMaurier with our fourth social distancing story from the pages of The Invention of Everything. And this one just fits so well because it has to do with choices and the choices we have. And a lot of people are probably thinking that, hey, during this time of social distancing, we don't have many choices. There are the rules, there are the guidelines, and then you have your choice to obey them or to not obey them. And that's just not true. We have choices all the time. And the choices right now are even more important because we have to decide what to do with this time that we've been given. I had the opportunity recently to interview a man named Matt Cox who had spent 12 years in prison due to a financial crime. And when he was being sentenced, someone else came up to him that had also served time and told him two things. They said that during that time, you will meet the most amazing people you've ever met in your life in prison, and you will have some of the best times of your life in prison. And Matt thought this guy was crazy. And about 2 years later, they're in a common room and they're playing the game of Risk. They've been going on for 2 days and they're having fun and drinking sodas and giving each other a hard time. And people are watching and he's thinking, these are great people and I'm having a great time. And the real moral of this story is, what did Matt do with that 12 years? Well, he became a voracious reader, and this is nothing small for someone who has severe dyslexia. And he took a lot of therapy at the time that was offered. He really got into himself and looked at some of the choices that he's made over the year and changed some things about himself. And then he wrote his memoir. And by writing his memoir, he found a lot of the choices that he made, a lot of the reasons, and he did a lot of therapeutic inward looking at himself. And then he went and he wrote the memoir of many of the inmates that he served with. So before we get started, I also want to give a shout out to a guy named Pete Herrick, and I'm going to tag Pete in this post. Pete is a great guy. He's a voice actor that has done a lot of narration for us over the years, and he posted something this week that is just genius. He went on his social media and he posted this thing that said, hey, look, we're all looking at the negative stuff. Just post one good thing that has happened to you during this time of social distancing, and it blew up. A couple people got puppies and they posted pictures of their puppies. People painted houses. There were a lot of gardens that were planted. One lady was coming home from work and she had been furloughed. She was crying. She was upset. The next day found out she was pregnant. So she spent the time that she has now getting ready and being healthy. One guy built a dining room table, had never built one before. People were talking about being closer to their families than I've ever been. A lot of people are saying that family dinners are now a big deal. My wife is learning Spanish every night. My wife is in the dining room learning Spanish. So you have choices for everything. Everything there's a choice, especially this time. Choose to make the most out of it. So that brings us to our fourth story, which is called You Choose. In Oneonta, New York, on the corner of Main and Church Streets, once sat a bar that I worked in during college called Red's Filling Station. Now, this was a great place. The outside was covered in red painted stone, and the inside had walls and ceilings with vintage gas pumps, motorcycles, and license plates. This is long before TGI Friday style became so common. Red's wasn't named for the color of the building, but for one crotchety upstater who breezed in once a week to complain about our ice usage and sign our paychecks. It was the loudest, craziest, and most popular watering hole in that part of the Catskills. And it where several of my friends and I worked as bartenders one summer. And one night, this would have been somewhere in July or August of 1985, my roommate Kurt, who also worked there, and I realized at the same time that not only was our rent due in a few days, but we were exactly $84 short. So we came up with a plan. It was a quick and creative plan that only had one moving part. We would make all the money we needed in one night just in tips. And we would do it by simply telling the customers exactly what we wanted them to tip us. The doors opened, our shifts began, and soon the bar was 3 feet deep with summer college kids and townies all clamoring for drinks. I went first. Okay, 2 beers, I said. Set the drinks down on the bar in front of a guy with a Sammy Hagar t-shirt. That'll be $1.50 for the beer and $1 tip, so $2.50. Sammy Hagar dropped the cash on the bar and made the way for the next customer. Okay, Kurt yelled out. Here we go. 2 vodka cranberries and a Molson, $4.50, and with a tip, that'll be $6. And it went like this for an hour until we had made the $84 we needed. Then we went back to allowing the customers to decide how much to tip us, and the remainder of the night was not as near as prosperous. Now, what's interesting about this is that no one, not one single person, questioned us. No one complained, and no one tipped less or more than we told them to. Now, this is a story I tell at barbecues and over lunches, but it's important here because it frames the next story, the important story. Fast forward about 15 years, and I was now married. We had bought our first home, and we were raising our 2 sons in a town called Vestal, New York. For 10 years, I made a living in industrial computer electronics, which is a fancy way to say I befriended corporate buyers and tried to talk them into buying more from me and less from my competition. And so life was pretty good. Then as the electronic industries began to shift slightly, I felt the pinch. And in May of 1999, I received the first of my 2 layoffs that I had in my career. I wasn't really concerned about the layoff because I had received job offers from competitors pretty often, so I contacted them. But by then, everyone was feeling the same pinch. And the shift in the industry and these contacts were scrambling to hold on to their own jobs. With the severance I received, along with unemployment, we could just take care of the essentials. If we tightened our belts a bit, so we did. And I made the job hunt my full-time position, leaving early and coming home late. During this time, one company made me a very interesting proposal. Like everyone else, the company had a hiring freeze in place. But if I would agree to work for commission only, covering my own hotel, gas, and expenses, and receive a commission on new business, then I could start right away. It wasn't ideal. Money would go out before it came back in, and if I sold something the first day, it would be months before commission followed. But it kept me in front of customers, making new contacts, and kept me in the industry, so I agreed. A few months went by, and a little money was trickling in, but not very much. Then the vice president of sales was retiring and had hired his replacement. And they were both flying into Rochester to introduce the new VP to one of our largest customers. So my job was to make the 3-hour drive to pick them up at the airport, go to the meeting, and then get them back to the airport. The thing was, I could tell by the phone conversations of the past few weeks that the honeymoon was over and this relationship would soon end. When the plane landed, I was there to pick them up. Well, we should probably start with the real reason you're here and get that out of the way first, I said in a friendly tone, and they both laughed this off. I was wrong. They had no interest in making any changes. In fact, I was doing a great job. The 1.5-hour drive from the airport to the meeting was light, and it was cordial. We had our meeting, it went well, as did the working lunch after. Then we began the long drive back to the airport. When we were about 40 minutes from the airport, the mood changed. They started talking about their expectations were higher than what I was hitting. Was I really giving this my full attention? I hadn't set up as many new customers as they were hoping. They weren't sure this was really working for them. So they were canceling our agreement, which would have been fine, except that then they started to get angry. The atmosphere started to intensify and even get threatening. As this anger built up on their end, I felt myself move right into defense mode. I offered to listen and apologize. I brainstormed. I told them I could think about working harder, and I thought about sacrifices I could make. And then something clicked. In a brief moment of lucidness, everything snapped into place and became absolutely clear. I knew then the difference between what I had to do and what I didn't have to do. Everything stopped, and I knew what my options were. So without anger, without emotion, I put on my turn signal and worked the car towards the far right lane. "What are you doing?" the older VP snapped. "I'm going home," I said, in a calm and almost sleepy tone. "So I'll let you guys out here." There was a moment of quiet, then a laugh. "Very funny," he said. Then he pointed down the road and gave the new VP in the backseat one of those "don't worry, I've got this under control" kind of looks. But I continued to move the car to the right and into the side of the highway, and then I stopped. Okay, the new VP joined in from the back. "I can understand you're upset. Let's talk about this. Let's head back to the airport and sit down and I'm not upset," I said. I put the car in park. "I'm not upset at all. This isn't working for either one of us. But I also don't have to take you to the airport." This idea confused them. What was I talking about? Of course I had to take them to the airport. What kind of lunatic was I? I had to take them to the airport. Didn't I see that? You have to. No, I don't, I said. And still there was not a single trace of anger in me. I don't have to, and I don't want to, so I'm not going to. Several moments of frustrated silence followed before anyone spoke. Well, the current VP finally said, with a cocky smirk, then we have an issue, because we're not getting out of this car. That's fine, I said. But I'm turning around at that U-turn spot right up there. And then I'm heading 3 hours home in the opposite direction. So if you want to get to the airport, this is the closest you'll be. More silence. More looks back and forth. Then I pressed the button that popped the trunk, and they both sat there quietly. The old VP got out of the car, and the new one followed. I let them get their bags from the trunk, and I shut it. Then I pulled out, turned the car around, and headed home. I never saw or heard from either one again. Now, do I feel bad for leaving a 65-year-old man and his overweight successor on the side of Highway 90 in the middle of the summer? No, not at all. I mean, they both had cell phones. Granted, back then they were the size of hoagie rolls and cost about $6 a minute, but they could have called somebody. And I take no pride in the act of leaving them, only in clearly seeing what my options were. The point was that I didn't have to drive them to the airport, and I didn't want to, so I didn't. I made a choice instead of following the momentum. I also have no bitterness or anger towards them. I didn't then, and I don't now. Because it's not about anger. It's about options. Because there is nothing in life, and I mean absolutely nothing, that we have to do. We don't have to go to work. We don't have to make a car payment. We don't have to pay taxes. We choose to do all those things. Now, there are repercussions if we don't do them. Yeah, of course there are. But there's a cause and effect in all things. Yes, we can make bad choices, and we do, every day. But the challenge is to make sure that they're our choices, not just our reactions. Choose to do it or not to do it. These are the only options. Never do something simply because the bartender tells you to, or because the guy going to the airport needs a lift. It's not your fault that those two idiot bartenders didn't budget for their rent, or that those two businessmen didn't want to spring for a rental car. You determine if you want to tip them or give them a ride. You decide, and then you choose. That was You Choose. Be safe.